So we will be starting the session with Aurod, who is a senior Scrum Master, Agile coach at Infosys from Australia. He will be talking about challenges with Scrum. Can Kanban be an alternative? And this session will be facilitated by Srijit.
So once again, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. So this is our first program in 2022. So Scrum versus Kanban, and will Kanban be an alternative for Scrum? So this must be more than a decade-old debate that we all have been discussing and finding out what could be the right fit for various transformations, right? So today I have a privilege to welcome Orod, who is working in Australia, Infosys, who is a SPC as well as a seasoned lean agile transformation specialist, who whose passion is to let the people and leaders unlearn what is their past experience and create a lean powerhouse of the organizations. So welcome Orod for the first session of 2022 of the Agile Network India. We are looking forward to listen from your experience and have some key takeaways. So throughout the session, please put questions in the chat window. We will take it up after the session and address as much as possible. And as Prashant said, if we are not able to address, we will address it offline as well. So welcome, Arod.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and it's a pleasure to speak as the first person in 2022. Good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. However, here in Australia is afternoon. It's almost 3:30 in the afternoon. So, as you mentioned, I'm Orod Semsarzadeh. I live in Australia, work for Infosys as an Agile coach. I'm a Scrum Master certified, SAFe trainer and consultant, and as well as certified Kanban trainer. And today I'm going to talk about the challenges that we have with Scrum and discuss about Kanban and see if Kanban can be another alternative. Fortunately, I had really good experience with Scrum, and I think I was lucky enough that my first experience with Scrum framework as a developer around 2009 was a really good experience. So today I'm not here to say Scrum is not good because I personally had good experience. I'm basically here to discuss about the challenges that we have and also look at Kanban as an alternative and also help us to improve. But before I basically start, the focus of this session will be the agility and what agility means. So we define it first and see Scrum and Kanban, how they can increase and improve agility in an organization. We're going to talk about what Scrum is. I'm sure everyone familiar with Scrum and also Kanban, but I think it's good to make sure everyone on the same page and everyone have the same understanding, at least in this 1 hour. So quickly talk about Scrum and also based on my experience, what we need to have a successful and effective Scrum. And also Scrum change management, which we compare it with Kanban change management, and we also talk about Scrum challenges as we go. We talk about Kanban and Kanban change management and compare them, and hopefully at the end, maybe 10-15 minutes, we have enough time to have some question and answer. So we keep talking about being agile. We are agile. We want to transform to agile. We want to be agile, that kind of thing. But the main question is not being agile or transform to agile. As my point of view, I think what matters is what we need to do to improve agility continuously. because this is a journey. It's not like we're here and then we're done. So to make sure we all have the same understanding and about agility, we need to define it first. So agility means delivering the right work to the right customer at the right time. Then you can pivot, then you can change direction, and that gives you more agility. There are lots of framework that help us to achieve this agility and improve it. Things like Scrum, Safe, Extreme Programming, feature-driven development, and a lot of other framework. Each framework has multiple principles and practices that we need to apply to increase the agility in an organization. Things like time boxing, slicing, create user story, uh, you know, do a frequent demo, continuous integration, that kind of thing. All right, so let's see what Scrum is. Scrum, it's a agile development framework, but before we talk about Scrum as a framework, I think it's very important to understand where this Scrum terminology came from originally. Scrum, it's an activity in rugby, which all the team member, they huddle and they push and help each other to walk as a unit, to walk together. It's not like a relay race, for example, that one person run and then everyone else waits. And the terminology came from rugby. So put all the practices and everything aside for a second. If you want to have a Scrum team and successful Scrum team, that means these people with different skills, they help each other and work together as one unit. They're not individual, they are one team. And this is very important in Scrum framework. So Scrum start with building a Scrum team, which basically means this team should be cross-functional, which means it has all the skills to define the product, build the product, test the product, and deploy it and release it and give it to the customer. Everything end to end in one team. We need all this skill in one team. If we don't have it, then this team is not cross-functional and it's not a Scrum team. And because we have all the skills in this team, then they can manage themselves. They don't basically need anyone to manage them. They should be able to manage themselves. Scrum also prescribe and introduce new roles to the organization. Scrum needs a coach. Each team needs a coach, which is called Scrum Master. It's a person who has mastery in Scrum and coach the team and help them to understand the value of Scrum and why they need to do it and make sure they follow the principles and practices as they go. They also need someone product owner who own the product backlog, prioritize the backlog item to make sure always team work on the highest priority for the organization and deliver the highest value to the customer. And also multiple people with different skills who basically work on defining, building, and delivering the product. Scrum also has some artifact, product backlog, sprint backlog, and definition of done. So if you don't have definition of done, you're not Scrum, or you don't follow Scrum framework. So you have to follow everything that Scrum said, and then you can be a Scrum team. And also some practices like time boxing, relative estimation with story points, and other stuff. So as I said, Scrum is a framework that needs a context to be successful. And our job as a coach or Scrum Master is to build that context. So the first thing we do is to try to build the context. Based on my experience in last almost 10, 11 years with lots of team and Scrum, which as I said, I had really good experience and also not very good experience. And when I compare and see, okay, why I had good experience with some team and not very good experience with another. So what happened? What was the differences? I basically summarize my experience in these items. So based on my experience, when I have these items, and by the way, you don't have to have all of them, more is always better. If you have more, that means you will have a better experience with the Scrum. So one thing helped me to have a successful transformation to Scrum was to have a team or T-shaped team, which means people, they might be specialized in one skill, but they can work on everything else as well, or they can help other people as well. Things like, developer can do the test or tester can write code. For example, one of my experience as a developer, as I said, the first experience with the Scrum, I was a developer. In that team, we didn't have any tester. No one manually tests. We as a developer, we write tests, we write code, we test it ourselves. When we're happy, we run all the tests. One click, it integrate, run again all the tests. If everything passed, it will even release it to production. So basically from when I finish the code until the code goes to production took not more than 45 minutes. And if I broke the build, for example, it sent out an email to everyone and said, Orod broke the build, and we had 10 minutes to either fix the issue and roll forward or roll it back to the previous stable version. I was a front-end developer, but I also helped with the backend when they needed. So T-shape, it's a very important factor. Continuous integration, continuous delivery. That's another successful factor in a team. As I said, you don't have to have all of them, but if you have them, then you're going to have a better experience. Test automation is another one. So if you have enough test automation, then you don't need to manually test a lot of things. That helps you to slice your user story into smaller increment and then run lots of regression and lots of tests very quickly, and then help that the small increment go through the delivery pipeline very quickly. Another thing that help you to have better experience is minimize the external dependency. So for example, if another team needs to do deploy for you, then you have a dependency to another team, and that cause some waiting time. And then at the end of sprint, a few things won't be done. So imagine, for example, you have a piece of code, finish on Monday, you have a fixed release cycle on Wednesday, so you have to wait 2 days, then it deploy to UAT, then test, someone test it, find the bug, ask to test it, you to fix it, developer fix it. Again, you need to wait a couple of days for the next cycle, the release cycle. And then your story will slip to the next sprint and you fail. So that also helps. Another thing is, as you know, when you plan in sprint planning, then the plan is fixed. Ideally, nothing should change the scope, nothing should change the plan, but always unplanned works happening. So if you have an unstable application with lots of urgent defect, then again, it disturb the plan, disturb the team, and you fail. So if you have a stable application, it helps a lot. Very important, product owner is the only one who has content authority on product backlog, is the one person who prioritizes the backlog. If product owner is not empowered by the company, other people, other manager come and change the priority when they want, then it causes problem. Scrum always focus on team and communication between teams. So you need to do lots of communication in Scrum team. So if you don't have a high level of communication in the team, that causes problem, because as I said, team needs to work together as one unit, which means backend developer, front-end developer, tester, product owner, they constantly and continuously needs to talk to each other, communicate, demo to the product owner. This is what I've done. What do you think? Get feedback. So lots of communications happening. And the last but not least, and in fact, the most important one is you need a high level of trust and accountability in the team. If people don't trust each other, it causes a big problem in the Scrum team and you're gonna fail again. So think about it. When I want to work with a new organization, I always look and see which of these they have, and try to improve what they don't have or needs to be improved. So when we want to start Scrum from scratch in a new organization, Scrum use a revolutionary approach, which means we start with restructuring the organization. People used to work in development team, test team, BA team, etc., etc. Now we say, all right, you're not part of test anymore. You are part of team Alpha, team Bravo, X, Y, etc. So we restructured the organization. We changed people's job title. We gave them new responsibility, new role. We introduced Scrum Master. They never had a Scrum Master. We introduced Product Owner. They never had Product Owner. And they need to be trained or hired from other consultancy or outside the organization, or train someone who used to be a tester to become a Scrum Master. So that's another thing Scrum does. And also force people and prescribe people how to work. They need to work iteratively. They need to time box the sprint. They need to have a sprint planning. Sprint start on a particular date and finish on this particular date. You need to fix the plan. You need to slice your user story. You need to relatively estimate it. You need to use story points and a lot of other stuff that Scrum prescribe and ask people to change their behavior and how they work. So after we introduce a Scrum, we create a Scrum team and train people, let's say 2-3 weeks or something like that, we think that we're ready. So we plan, we commit, we focus, and we sprint to achieve the goal. But unfortunately, as soon as we start, we notice that that's not really a sprint. There are lots of obstacles on the way, which we didn't think about it. Now we notice that, oh, we need to wait until someone else to deploy the code for us. That causes lots of waiting time and a lot of other stuff. And then at the end of your sprint, you notice that you plan to do, I don't know, 30 story points and you deliver 10 story points. And then people come and say, oh, you failed. Why you failed? What is that? Scrum doesn't work. Think that. There are lots of other challenges that can happen. The first one, the most important one, is that when we ask people to change their behavior, that creates fear. It causes lower self-esteem. It confuses people because good or bad, for a very long time, especially in large organizations, people work as a tester for like 20, 30 years. And now you say, okay, that's not how it works. You need to change, right? And the middle management, all right, you're not going to manage the team and people anymore. And they feel that they're redundant organization. They don't need them. We hire people with, new skills. And then they were like, okay, why, what I'm doing here? And then they start making, they resist to change. And that's one of the biggest, um, and common symptom of the failure. Another thing is when we restructure the organization and ask people to work differently, we need to do lots of training, hire new people, and that costs. One of the good examples happened to me recently is that one of the clients that I'm working with, they used to have a very good tester. They asked this person, they trained him to be a Scrum Master. So they used to have a good tester, no Scrum Master. Now they have a bad Scrum Master and no tester. And that's cost them because now they need to hire a new tester and then train that person. And it goes and goes and it happens all the time. So it's very costly. And also, it takes time. Most people not realize that this change, it takes time. They were like, okay, we invest after 6 months, after a year, then we need to sprint. We need to be agile, and everything should be uh, fine. But it's not as easy and as quick as clients and organization expect. Product owners normally don't have, or they're not empowered, or don't have authority on the backlog. Other manager come and change the backlog, and it cause lots of this distraction to the plan, and again cause problem. When you have a Scrum team, there are lots of shared services, things like UX designer, for example, or BA. There is no really work or anything defined for this kind of people. So they get confused, team get confused, they're not quite clear what to do. Also, there is no really way to show the dependency in Scrum. So basically, as I said, you must have a cross-functional. What if the team is not cross-functional? What Scrum can do with that? And it's very common. One of the very important artifact of Scrum is definition of done. So what is definition of done? At the end of sprint, the work, we say, okay, it's tested, it's done, but it's not deployed yet. It's not in production. So what do you want to do with that? Is the job actually done, or is still something else we need to do? Normally, when you say done, that means it's just tested UAT, and then 2 months later, 1 month later, when the release schedule happened, then you need to do a very big regression. You find lots of defect because what you tested was a very old version of the application, not the latest version. So how you want to visualize that, how you want to track it. Also, Scrum try to simplify the discovery phase or the upstream work. So basically, what in a lot of large organization, government, there are lots of work needs to happen before the work is ready, before even we talk to the developer and test and those kind of delivery team. How we want to visualize it? Do we need to do it every sprint? Then what happened to the velocity? Are we going to calculate the BA's capacity into that or not? And there are lots of confusion happening, and it's very common, almost always happen. Writing good user story, it's a very big challenge, especially slice it vertically. And vertically means, you need to have everything like backend, front end, test, deploy, everything must be in one user story. How you can slice it to fit into 2 weeks of sprint when you work on a very old, complex application. Sometimes it's impossible to slice it. They don't have enough test automation. They need to do lots of regression. If you have lots of small slices of user story, that means tester needs to do manually run regression multiple times. Doesn't really make sense. Then your user story becomes a lot bigger, and then it slips from sprint. Another thing is story point. As you probably know, Scrum is the oldest agile delivery framework. I think it's around 25 years old now. It's even older than Agile Manifesto. And still people not comfortable with story point. They don't really know what does that mean. They need some experienced Scrum Master to help them. And as my point of view, if a problem after 25 years hasn't resolved, that's a problem. So maybe we need to think differently. Maybe we need to find another solution. Do we need to estimate it or not? So these are very common challenges that happen after we transform to Scrum. So now let's talk about Kanban and see, first of all, what Kanban is or what Kanban is not. So first of all, Kanban is not a framework. And that means, unlike Scrum or SAFe or other agile framework that prescribe the solution, Kanban doesn't prescribe anything. It starts from what you're doing. You don't need to change anything. It doesn't introduce any new role. And also Kanban is not a wall with lots of cards on that. And I explained what Kanban is. In Kanban system tries to balance the demand, the request come from customer, and the capability, how much delivery team can deliver. So try to balance these two and focus on continuous delivery and try to create a sustainable and continuous delivery and optimize it as it goes gradually. So how Kanban try to achieve this sustainable delivery and sustainable flow? There are lots of practices and principles. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just to simplify it, Kanban try to achieve this sustainable system by visualizing the work, everything we do, and the workflow, how this work flow through the system. So we visualize this. And also we use a signal to show us when the capability is available, and we need to make sure the demand is also available when the capability is available. And then when capability is available, then the person can pull the work. For example, in this simple example, we have testing with one work in progress. And then we have 3 works ready for testing. So when this person is working on this, no one or no card will move to this column because this person is still working. This work is still being in test. When it's finished, then the highest priority that's ready to be pulled will be pulled by someone and move it here and start testing. And that means pull system. So when you're ready, you pull the work, just to simplify. All right. Kanban also has a change management. Unlike Scrum, which was revolutionary, Kanban has an evolutionary approach. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't introduce new roles. It's not going to change people's job descriptions, people's title. It just starts from what you're doing now. You can have a Kanban system for even one person. You don't need to have a cross-functional team. And in fact, this picture, which is in my background as well, that's my personal Kanban system. So I have my own personal Kanban system for what I'm doing. And one of the card behind me, it represents this presentation. So when it's done, I'll pull it out to done, pull another work. So Kanban has a different maturity level. So there are 7 different levels, which are in here. I just put up to maturity level 4. If you're interested, you can go and read David Anderson, the founder of Kanban University and Kanban Kanban methodology. He talked in Kanban India in December, and he talked about the maturity level, Kanban maturity. So I encourage you to maybe Google it and listen to what he said, because then everything makes more sense. But for this session, just very quickly go through a different level of maturity. So normally the first level is that there is no process in the organization, everyone overloaded, everyone stressed, there is no predictability, and we have to manage every single individual. The next level is that people, they have a process, they want to improve the process and achieve a consistent process over the system. We focus on the team, not just one individual, but still there are some individual in the organization that they specialize in particular things. If some part of the application is broken, people directly go to that person and say, hey, can you fix this one? This is where you know how to fix it. So if that's the situation in an organization, that means they are in level 1. And in fact, most organizations that I work with at the beginning, they normally in maturity level 1. I haven't worked in any organization maturity level 0. And after that, so the next maturity level is that we focus on the team, the process is consistent, but there is the demand and capability is still not balanced. So demand is a lot higher than capability. So we need to manage it. Priority might change, but we can deliver a work quicker. So that's something we achieve. And individual, they're not that important. All the individuals can help each other, can work on different part of the application and product, but still you need someone to manage the team. So normally most of the Scrum team, based on my experience, they stuck in level 2. Then when you become more mature, you notice that your customer is happier, you can deliver what you plan, you committed to something, the plan won't change, people don't just push things to the plan, to the committed work. You balance the demand and capability. So the demand is not a lot more than capability. You always have enough work to do. And then at this stage, you have agility because now you can predict when to start the work to deliver it to the right customer at the right time, and then pick another path and another work. Scrum at best, based on my experience, will reach you up to here. So what else? What do we need to do after that? Now we have multiple teams, they perfectly work fine. Now level 4, we have multiple teams or multiple services, they work together. We optimize the flow between all these services, and then that gives us the business agility, a higher level in the entire organization. And then level 5 and 6, which is pretty much out of the scope of this session. But the point is that you go to the level of maturity when you mature enough, when you're ready at Kanban point of view. Unlike Scrum, that people don't even have a board, and then we try to push them to level 3 from 1 or 0 to 3. They're not ready. Mentally, technically, they're still not, they haven't achieved the maturity level to even cope in this level. And that's basically the cause of failure of Scrum, and people start become uncomfortable and say, okay, Scrum doesn't work. That's because you're still not mature enough. But Kanban, on the other hand, it helps you to grow as you go. And when you're ready, then you go to the next one. When you're ready, you notice that, oh, I need to change something. Not push people and force people to go to that level. So every change that we do in an organization, at the beginning, it causes some, it has a negative impact. For example, in a revolutionary approach, because the change is big, the negative impact is also high. So you probably noticed that we train people, we start Scrum, the first couple of sprint, couple of months, people even deliver less than before. Unless you have, experienced Scrum Master, experienced team, and a good communication and collaboration, then that might be a little bit less. But still, because the change is big, the impact also big. However, on the other hand, when you have an evolutionary approach, when you just change a little bit just to fit the purpose, if it doesn't work, you can always roll back. So for example, you visualize the work, people come and say, oh, I don't want to visualize my work, it doesn't work for me. All right, don't visualize it. Doesn't work for you, you don't have to do it. The cost is low and the learning is also quicker. So I also encourage you to have a look at the J curve and how change impact on organization. But keep in mind that small changes always easier to test, easier to learn, and easier to prove that this change works or not. If you restructure the organization, it's very, very difficult to come back to the previous, how you used to work, because you invest a lot. After 1 year, you can't come back. You can't go back to where you used to be. All right, and that's basically a very quick comparison between Scrum and Kanban. However, might not be quite applicable because Scrum is a framework, Kanban is not really a framework, but because they both try to improve agility in organizations, so we can compare them as agility point of view. So Scrum has a fixed sprint, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, you're normally not going to change it. However, Kanban just focus on the flow of the work. There is no starting point or end, or we plan today, we finish 2 weeks later, etc. The key metrics in Scrum is velocity, and the goal first is to have a consistent velocity and then improve it. If one sprint you deliver 10, another sprint 12, and then 45, and then 12 again, that means there is something's wrong. You need to look at it, because you ideally need to achieve a consistent velocity in Scrum. In Kanban, we measure the lead time, when the work started, when it's done. In Scrum, we have some specific role, prescriptive. Kanban, no role. Whatever you do, whatever job title you have, you can keep it. Scrum doesn't really have a WIP limit. And even if you want to use it, even if the tools allow you to use it, it's kind of useless. However, when you plan, the number of work that you plan ideally should be fixed. In Kanban, we use a WIP just to send a signal to see that, to make sure, okay, capability is available and ready to pull the next work. Scrum prescribed the definition of team. What team means should be cross-functional. However, in Kanban, as I said, you don't necessarily need to have a cross-functional team. You don't even have to have a team. You can have a personal individual Kanban if you are maturity level 0, for example. And the main difference, the biggest difference between Scrum and Kanban is their change management. Scrum use a revolutionary change management, however, Kanban use evolutionary change management and improve as it goes. All right, I hope that was useful. Thanks, everyone. And now I over to you, Prashant. If anyone has any question.
Hey, hi, Aurod. I have one question.
Sure.
Hey, what about Scrumban? So when we talk about Scrumban, where we use Scrum plus Kanban both, so what about WIP limits and cadences and roles which we follow?
Yeah. So Scrum Band basically means when you have a Scrum team and you want to improve and move to Kanban, then there is a time that you still kind of Scrum, but you try to do Kanban. So it's not a final situation, it's just a period between Scrum completely transformed to Kanban. In that scenario, yes, you normally can use WIP limit, if that's the goal, if you don't want to be Scrum anymore, but because people's used to the cadence of the sprint and the meeting and stuff like that, then yes. Did I answer your question?
Yep. Alright, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, hi,
So
Aurad. This is Kaushik Purohit. And I would like to ask one question. If I understand, Kanban recommends that we have equal batch sizes of the work items. Okay. If I understand, majority of the Kanban is used in ticketing based systems or defect fixing sort of scenarios where more or less the batch size is equal. But for fresh development, if we are not able to break down the stories into equal chunks, or we do not know if they would be of equal sizes, would Kanban really be helpful, or do you recommend that for fresh development we should use Scrum, and for defect fixing we should use Kanban?
Okay, so first of all, in Kanban, can you still see my camera is still open? Something, oh, okay. Sorry. So Kanban, in Kanban, you don't need to estimate the work. Kanban, you don't need to estimate. Okay. However, my personal experience, if you can break it into smaller pieces, it's always helpful, because smaller work, it's easier to be done and test and stuff like that. But you don't have to estimate, and it doesn't have to have, all the work items have the same size, because it's impossible to have the same size. And another thing is that you said, if you can't break the work into smaller pieces, then definitely Scrum fail. Because in Scrum, you must finish your story in your sprint, which is not more than 4 weeks. And 90% of the team use 2 weeks a sprint. So if you can't break it, then you definitely fail in Scrum. However, in Kanban, you don't fail, it just takes longer. But recommended to slice the work as much as possible.
Orit, can I ask you a question? Orit, hello?
Yes, yes.
Orit, I just have a question here. Like, I'm wondering, there are scenarios where, you can do the work, the same work can be done either using Kanban or Scrum also. You can use both and do the same work. So how do you really, choose which of these will you go for, either Kanban or Scrum? What are the basic parameters which will decide upon to understand that we can use Scrum or Kanban? How is the evaluation being done basically, Orit?
So I think the best benchmark is, can you have a cross-functional team or not? If the answer is no, then forget about Scrum in the first place. Otherwise, you go through the rabbit hole, okay? And you continue to keep failing in Scrum. Kanban is a lot cheaper, okay? So if the organization needs to change and minimize the work and minimize the cost and minimize the risk, of course, Kanban is a better option. But if you can have a cross-functional, if company is happy to invest for Scrum Master training, all those kind of things, you can try Scrum. However, in the Kanban maturity level, as I mentioned, if you go with Scrum, then you start with level 3. There is no way to improve after that. Right? But Kanban let you to improve. And that's what happened to a lot of high-performing Scrum team that I work with. We reached to the point that, as I said, in 45 minutes we delivered, and then I was like, all right, what's the next step? The next step is to, do more Scrum team, and then dependency, and then chaos happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we will take the questions from the chat window now. I think there was a question from Rita asking, what do you mean by team maturity in Scrum and Kanban? What are the metrics for measuring the maturity? Orad, would you
So
like to add on that
in
one?
Kanban maturity, as I said, I would suggest you to either listen to David Anderson Kanban maturity model, or a little bit read about it, because it's a lot bigger than, in scope of today's session. But for Scrum maturity, again, there are lots of different assessment, but as my point of view, if the level of trust is high, if the collaboration and communication is high, that means you have a good Scrum team. If you have a cross-functional team, that's a good maturity level for Scrum. But I strongly encourage everyone to have a look at Kanban maturity model, and especially focus up to level 4. You can ignore 5 and 6. It's just too advanced.
Yeah, Orad, I have another question, Orad. Basically, I'm just trying to understand if there are any minimum prescribed ceremonies. Like we do have a lot of ceremonies in Scrum, like daily stand-up, sprint grooming, I mean, backlog grooming and all that. So it's
Mhm.
similar, in a similar way, does Kanban dictate any kind of ceremonies which are minimum required to run a Kanban work actually?
Depends on the maturity level. There are different events, but Kanban doesn't prescribe anything. If you need, you can have it. If you don't need, you don't need to have it, right? And some organizations already have some sort of meeting, and you can
Because,
just use
yeah,
them.
Orad,
But
why I'm
but
asking,
I'm not done. Let me finish. But the basic things is that uh, you need at least, right, to start with, you need to have maybe weekly replenishment meeting, which means the job that's ready to start, you pull them to committed, for example, stage, right, in replenishment. So team know that what's the next work that they need to pull when they're ready.
okay. Orad,
Yeah.
extended to the same question, what
Mhm.
I'm asking you is, see, we have something called as retrospectives or retros in your Scrum. Don't you feel that the work we are doing in Kanban will be
Mhm.
more effective if once in a month or something like that, frequency based, if we
Yeah.
can have a retrospective that will improve the overall, delivery, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you
Okay.
think that's a monthly meeting, it's good, you can do monthly. If you think every 2 weeks is good, you can have every 2 weeks. You might say, okay, I want to do it on demand when we need it. Okay, that's another option.
Okay.
But yeah,
Thank you,
of
Okay.
course.
Orad.
I
So
personally a big fan of having a cadence base, because that gives predictability to people. So people know that, next week, Monday, 10 o'clock, we're gonna meet. I
Okay.
personally like that. So they can plan
Okay.
in advance rather than just
Okay.
let's do it now. But
Thanks
however,
for
having the on-demand meeting rather than cadence-based, it shows that you have higher maturity in the organization and team. But
wonderful.
good
okay,
Thank you,
question.
so
Orad.
I think
Wonderful.
we will take one more
Wonderful
question. So yeah,
answer.
thanks, Harry. I think we will take one more question. It is from Amar. So the question is Kanban like the next level for Scrum? Probably this is related to the maturity model that we have, how we are trying to write a parallel between Scrum and Kanban. So would you like to add more on that one, Orod?
So if you achieve a very, very high performing Scrum team, then I think that's the time to start looking at Kanban. If there is nothing else to improve in your Scrum team, demand and capability balance, you always planned and deliver what you plan and committed, and now you want to expand it, then I think it's a good time to start looking at Kanban to go to the next level of maturity.
Wonderful. Any last one question?
Just
Yeah,
one question.
sure.
In With respect to the product roadmap and the releases that we have, so how do you suggest in Kanban we should operate? Because it is a continuous flow of work that we have to do, and in between, how do you suggest? Like, I mean, what are the best practices to manage the releases in between or in line with the product roadmap that we have?
Well, I and also I Kanban, I and Kanban recommend to continuously deliver. So if you can have a continuous delivery, when the work is ready, just get it out. Small and continuous delivery gives more confidence to the customer and also to the team, because when it's released, get it out of their way, they can focus on something else, right? So frequent release is always better.
All right, thank you.
I just have one question to say, one comment, please. Will you say that Kanban has to do with like enhancement of projects, while Scrum is for development? Like,
No,
okay,
no. Whatever you do with Scrum, you can do with Kanban, slightly better.
thank you.
No worries. And by the way, if anyone has any question or needs more clarification, please be in touch on LinkedIn. We can talk offline. Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
That will be
Could you
great,
share your
Arod.
LinkedIn detail?
Sorry.
Your LinkedIn.
LinkedIn information, please.
If you search my name, you'll find it. There is only one Orod in the world who lives in Australia.
Yeah,
So,
we will be sharing it with you. Okay, we will be
Thank you.
sharing with you the link.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are on the planned time on the top of the hour. So appreciate all the inputs, all the questions, and wonderful session, Arod. It was really a learning for each of us.